All right. So, what we're going to talk about today is how to use the lion. And then I'm going to make a second part about how to beat the lion. So, I just played in the Texas Open and I've got some videos on that you can check out on the channel. But the lion was my MVP. I mean, for Pete's sake, his 16 attacks against my poor AdMech player in the last round, I think I gave him like 28 saves because of the sustained hits. The Lion was the MVP of my list, and I played a lot of things wrong and made mistakes. The Lion and how I played him was the only reason I did as well as I did. So I want to show you against World Eaters because I'm very familiar with World Eaters, A. And a lot of what I kept hearing was like, okay, well, if you were against a real melee army, it would be different. So I actually played a very good World Eater player last night, and I want to show kind of what happened. And I'm going to show one that's a real example of what actually happened, and then a second example, so you guys can kind of have frame of reference. So for the sake of this, I use the exact same list that I ran in the tournament. So I've got 2 scouts, 2 Deathwing Knights, Desolation Marines, the Lion, Inner Circle Companions with Azrael, a Gladiator Lancer, and 3 Interceptors that are in Deep Strike. My other Terminators at the top of the board. Oh yeah, and I have a Caldus Assassin. But for the sake of this, we're really just going to look at what happened on literally turn 1. He was running a pretty standard World Eater list. He had 30 Berserkers, some Forge Fiends, just all the fixins, right? So I got to drop first. I dropped my scouts, right at that 9 inches. That I had them just an inch away from the wall. So if I went first when he made his charges, he'd have to be on the other side of the wall. So he could technically scout an inch, but I wasn't worried about that. He dropped his Goremongers kind of here in the middle because he didn't want to be, I don't think, quite as aggressive because the Goremongers don't have a great profile. If he was to charge him into my Deathwing Knights, probably he'll do like 2 damage and 3 damage, and then they just die. And so I think his goal was like, hey, if he wants to bring Azrael or anything out to the middle, I can just send my Goremongers out and, rock 'em, sock 'em robots. I ended up going first, which is what I wanted. So I'm going to show you, and I've talked about this many, many, many times. Sounds crazy, especially against World Eaters, but the way to beat them is to get in their face. It is to pressure them because it throws them off their game plan. So I'm not going to go over all the moves. I'm just going to show you one very easy interaction. Okay. So when I had these scouts, they did advance. They went a total of 8 inches. So I moved them about 7 inches, which kind of got them to like right about here because I kept them in the profile of the building. And then I did one of these because I had like an extra 2 inches of movement. And my whole goal was I wanted to make sure that I made it that they would have to go around me if they tried to move into me. He did, scout his spawn back just over here just to not get shot. But he had a slaughter bound with 8 bound, which are very scary units, and a forge fiend and another forge fiend. So like he had a lot of stuff. 20-man berserker brick moving 10 inches. And then I deep struck in my Terminators, and I did it in a very particular way, which I'll explain in just a second. I made sure to give him enough space where he could 100% land. And I also made sure I had enough space that the lion could go over here. Now, I didn't kind of like talk through this with him, so to speak, in the sense of like, I didn't bring him over there, but I did tell him, you know about the lion? Yep. He uppy downies, all that good jazz. Lion comes off the board. And in this example, what ended up happening was the combi lieutenant went out onto the midpoint to stage. Inner Circle Companions came over here with Azzy. My Deathwing Knights rolled a 1 on their advance, so they went to like, I want to say they went to like here, and that was about it. But the Caldus was able to get on the point. Whole reason I'm explaining this is because what I wanted to do was I wanted to force him to not get his stage turn and make him come out. If he wanted this Forge Fiend I had pre-measured 10 inches, he was not going to have a line to shoot into my Terminators. If he decided that he wanted to come straight and get as close as he could, because I put this guy right here, he can't get in this profile of this building, so he couldn't try to cut a line. So this Forge Fiend was not a threat. subsequently, I had the same thing here. This forge fiend was too far back. And so I did not have to worry about either the forge fiends shooting my terminators on turn one. That's very important. Second thing was I knew that he was going to have a longer charge, which meant he would probably land like over here. Um, and that's great. I wanted him to either land down here or over here. Again, like I said, I made this just enough to where he could get a unit here, but he can't get one right here. So here's what ended up happening. He played this very, very smart. He literally was like, okay, I'll bring the Forge Fiend right here. He knew this Forge Fiend was in no danger, so he moved it right here. And he was like, the two Forge Fiends will 100% pick up the scouts. No argument there. He moved the Chaos Spawn exactly 1 inch away. So they were like, here, give or take. And he did the same thing with his Slaughterbound and his 8-bound. He moved them exactly 1 inch away. His whole goal was he was going to go for a 7-inch charge. And that was the bait that I was trying to give. The bait I was trying to lay was I wanted the charge doable, but at the same time, just far enough out that you might really want to reconsider it. These scouts 100% died. I knew they were going to die. They did their job to the perfect extent. So they die, and he bangs out a 9-inch charge, which was perfect because he ended up charging and getting in his guys, which was exactly what I was wanting him to do. I had measured correctly, and he could not fit here because he'd be on top of my units. So what he ended up doing was he had one guy that wasn't going to get in from the way he had charged it. And that was okay. And he was fine with that. His kind of thought process behind it was, since these guys both went base to base, this guy was base to base with his friend, that they would be able to. What we ended up doing, because you should always be good sports with your opponents, we actually measured to see, could he get through the wall, different stuff. But we realized, okay, he could 100% get these guys in. Now, if this is what I had let happen, this would be catastrophic. The 8-bound, and the Slaughterbound would do real damage. But that's not what happened. So we're going to go backwards, because this is where timing and making sure you do things appropriately matters. So I'm going to put my scouts back. So now he's moved up. He's gotten 1 inch away. He's got his Forge Fiends in position. The end of his movement phase, because the lion started on the board, I'm going to go, okay, I'd like to do a rapid ingress. I measure out 9. And if you look at it, the beauty is, because they're so far back, because of my scouts, I can put the lion right here. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, it's only a 9-inch charge. I don't care. The lion has fights first. So what I was doing here is saying, okay, if I put the lion right here, if he charges up here on the top, the furthest he could be is right here and be in engagement range. And you're talking about a 4-inch charge, a 3 to 4 inch charge. So now we'll go back to what actually ended up happening. He shot these guys and he killed them. He did roll the charges, and he was actually a pretty smart player. He actually went ahead and he landed both. When he rolled his charge, he landed both of his charges. So I believe he rolled a 10, but he put his he put an 8-bound first, and it was about here. And then he put the Slaughterbound here. He got this other 8-bound in, and the last one wasn't in. And then he put the 2 Chaos Spawn. They charged in. They made it to about here. Well, here's the great part. These Chaos Spawn, while they do have a good profile, it's not an insane profile. So what I went ahead and did was I had the Lion Heroic in, the Lion Heroic in, and here's the part where this blows up his entire plan. The Lion is able to absolutely execute all 3 of these 8-bound, and the Lion actually was able to get that Slaughterbound down to 2 health. The other beautiful thing is because of the way he was positioned, I was out of engagement range. So the Slaughterbound attacks into the Deathwing Knights. He kills a Deathwing Knight. They did a few damage. But the cool part is the Deathwing Knights then picked up the Slaughterbound, and they actually picked up one of the Chaos Spawn. So from that exchange, because I used the lion correctly, I wiped out his entire unit, half of the other one, and the lion was no longer in combat. So on my turn, at the start of my turn, the lion went back into the air because now all of these units are dead and I have done what I needed to do. Because one chaos spawn doesn't have a prayer, even though this guy was hurt, doesn't have a prayer against these Deathwing Knights. And now the lion is free to do the exact same thing. And the worry that he has to deal with is if Karn and the boys come out of this car, they'll move 8, so they're going to come 11 inches. They can absolutely land a charge, and then guess what? When they get out here, the lion's going to pop down right here again, ready to do the same thing. And because Azrael will give you a CP and you'll get a CP on your turn, there, as long as you're smart with your CP, you should never go into your opponent's turn without a minimum of 2 command points, because then you can do this play over and over. And I looked at it from the same perspective of here in the middle. If he wanted to go 10 inches out, he can get to here. Let's say he bangs out a 3-inch charge, a 3-inch advance. He's only looking at like maybe a 5-inch charge into Azrael. The lion could go in with his sweep attack and he will pick up like 14 to 15 berserkers, easy breezy. So I'm just showing you this as an example of how you should be using the lion as a counterpiece. Against shooting armies, it's a lot more nuanced, but against melee armies, the lion is a hard counter because of the example I just used, that even when they decide to move, let's pretend that they banged out a 6-inch charge. Okay, so they go all the way, right? Which would mean my deep strike would be as hard as possible. Here's what's so great about this. Because it's done at the end of the movement before the charge phase, I can put him right in the middle so that I can reach over here or over here. So unless they were to roll like a 3-inch charge, and so they're just right here, the lion is really looking at, as long as there's a guy on the side, which I would assume there would be, it's a giant brick, and that would only be that would be like a 4-inch charge. The lion is easily going to be able to heroic intervene again and do the same thing again. So this is just an example of how you can use the lion and how he can be crippling against melee armies. Drop a like for the Emperor and subscribe for more content like this. And in the next video, we'll do a little blood for the blood god. And I'm actually going to show you how to counter the lion and how you can kill it. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.